we seem to potentially, depending on how this is structured, risk moving back to the bad old days of simply, for electoral gain, pumping the housing market in a self-defeating way.
So, Martin, you've got a lot of representations and requests to make the case on penalties in the child benefit system. Just tell us more.
There is a structural unfairness in the way that child benefit works. Once an individual starts to earn over £50,000, child benefit is reduced. Once they hit £60,000, you don't get child benefit anymore. Yeah. How that works technically, you might still get it, but then you have to pay it back through the tax system, but you won't get any benefit from it. Now, the unfairness on that is pretty simple. If you earn £60,000 as a single parent, you don't get child benefit. If you earn £60,000 and your partner earns £10,000, you don't get child benefit. But your next door neighbours may both earn £49,000. So that's total family income of £98,000, and they will get full child benefit. Now, the question I put to the Chancellor that I do think bears repeating was this. It came from a man called Alan who'd got in touch with me. And he said, my son's partner tragically died 34 days after giving birth to twins. My son has taken a new job that now pays him £60,000 and is struggling with the cost of living and mortgage repayments after the loss of a second income. HMRC has asked him to repay the child benefit. It seems grossly unfair that a couple can bring in nearly £100,000, but a single breadwinner loses out once they earn more than half of this. And reading between the lines on that, what you assume is he's had a slight pay rise, so he gets no child benefit, even though the family income, his son's family income, is less than it was before. Now, the Chancellor accepted when I spoke to him that this was structurally unfair. What he actually said to me was, yes, this is structurally unfair, but there are many structural unfairnesses within the tax system, which I managed to bite my tongue and not say, yes, but you're the Chancellor, you could fix them, which seemed quite a strange point at the time. So what you also have to understand here is when this was first introduced in April 2013, this was an issue then. Nothing has changed about it being an issue, except they haven't moved the thresholds. And millions more people have been hit by it because that threshold is still, you start losing it at 50,000 and use it in full at 60,000. Now, in practical terms, John, you will understand this. There's no way that on the 6th of March, the budget, which is what this letter is all for, he's going to come up with a new system that managed to structurally assess total family income, which is the way it should work. If you're going to limit it, it should work on total family income. Yeah. But what he could do, and what I would do if I were Chancellor, heaven forbid, is I would, in the short term, I would increase the amount of money that people could earn. Say, put it up to 65,000 to 75,000. 65,000 is where you start to lose it. 75,000 is where you lose it in total, because that's where it would have been had you ridden it with inflation since 2013. Yeah. And then I would say, and I am launching a consultation on how we can restructure this to make it fairer for families. Yeah. And I think there is a real head of steam building about this right now. There was an article in the Times on Saturday, I think it was, talking about child benefit. I put this to him 3 weeks ago, and I've got more and more people getting in touch. And if you're a Chancellor trying to win an election, do something popular that isn't that expensive, this is clearly one to do. I should note, while I've written to Jeremy Hunt on his request on those 4 issues, I have also sent the same letter to Rachel Reeves.
Indeed. It is a really weird anomaly, isn't it? How a well-off family, well-off household can get their child benefit, and a much poorer one sees it denied because they've crossed the threshold of £60,000. And you're saying change the numbers. You keep the anomaly, it would just hit fewer people.
Well, what I would do in the short term.
Yeah, but apart from the Chancellor saying, them's the breaks, what's the reason for this? What's the justification?
Because the tax system is based on individual taxation, but child benefit, you don't have a child by yourself. That's the problem. So, we look at individuals for tax, but a child is normally the product of 2 parents. There might only be one looking after the child, but it's normally the product of 2 parents. And that's the reason that this doesn't seem to work. Now, you're absolutely right. The solution I've said to you, because this issue is building ahead of steam now, is simply a short-term practical one. Make it affect fewer people, then you lower the injustice. It's still unjust for the people it affects, but make it affect fewer people. And then get as quick as you can to working out how you restructure it. You should say it's an anomaly. It's not the sole anomaly. It's actually another one in the childcare system. Those people who are entitled to use what's called tax-free childcare, which is a terribly misnamed system of basically where you save towards childcare and the state adds some money on top. It's nothing to do with tax. They need to change the name. And also those who are entitled to what they call free childcare, which is also misnamed. That's funded childcare. It's not free. The state pays, and some people might have to top up on top. Both of those are only if one individual parent doesn't earn over £100,000. So you have the same issue there, although it's much higher up the scale, that you could have two neighbouring families with combined family income of £199,000 who get it, and then you can have one earner exactly £100,000 on a single parent family and they wouldn't get it. So they seem to have done this anomaly. But what's really building the head of steam is just more and more people are being hit by the child benefit one.
Well, interesting to get that evidence of what is really, I don't know, energizing people. And I know in your sort of shopping list, you discussed ISAs and the way that bears on first-time buyers. You talk about phone and broadcast price hikes. And let's just pick on student living loans, because a lot of homes would be thinking about that. What's your issue with student living loans?
Well, this is somewhat personal, if I'm honest. Many people will know I have, for the past over a decade, been out there trying to explain to people not to allow the political spittle over student finance to put them off going to university, because you do not have to pay for university at the point of entry, and you only repay once you leave if you earn enough. It's effectively a form of limit. It works more like, it isn't a graduate tax, but it works more like a graduate tax than it does a loan. And when I met the Chancellor, I talked to him about student living loans, which is the amount of money you get given by the state to live off. And we're talking in England here. He immediately went, yes, but we've frozen tuition fees and that will help students. Well, freezing tuition fees doesn't help students. Freezing tuition fees helps graduates, because it's university leavers who repay tuition fees once they leave if they earn enough. The problem is, for the last few years, and especially this year, they have not put the student maintenance loan up with inflation. This year in England, it went up 2.8% when inflation was double digits. And what that means is you have a real terms cut in the amount that students have to live off. Now, as someone who has campaigned that I think that going to university has a huge boost for social mobility and social equality and social justice by allowing people, whatever background, not to have to pay up front, that they can go, and then it's only if they're successful afterwards financially that they pay. To have real-term cuts in student living loans is absolutely goes against social mobility, because what happens is those from the lowest income backgrounds, the poorest backgrounds, who have no money that is able to support them through their university lives, well, they can't afford to go to university once you start having these real-term cuts in a time when rents have exploded across the country. So not increasing the student living loan has a monumental hit on social mobility, and we're going to see students either not go, or potential students not going to university, or students from the poorest backgrounds dropping out, those from non-traditional university backgrounds dropping out because they cannot afford to feed themselves and pay their rents when they're at university. And I'm pleased to say I got contacted by the Russell Group of universities, which, as you'll know, is the top universities in the country, saying they've seen exactly this. Their research on it is showing exactly this is going on, and they're campaigning for the living loans to go up too. So I think we've been very, very short-sighted here by gradually death of 1,000 cuts year after year, and especially this year, real-term cuts in that living loan that really hits those from the poorest backgrounds, who we most of all want to say, you have a chance. You have a chance. If you want to go to university, you should be able to go. And I'm not sure I can put my hand on my heart, as I have done in previous years, and say, don't let the finance bother you anymore.
Really important point. And we're seeing the squeeze on universities and higher education, with universities relying more on overseas students because they pay higher fees, and even those students now dwindling. That the number of those coming here is going down because it is.
Well, I mean, we are an interesting country when it comes to students coming from abroad. Now, I understand there are a few that play fast and loose with entry requirements, but generally we seem to be campaigning to reduce the number of foreign students in this country. Basically, what other country goes out there trying to campaign to reduce one of its biggest export earners? I mean, students coming for education in Britain is a massive export earner. Why would we want to diminish that? I mean, we need to cater it properly, and we need to make sure there's enough places for UK students, but there will be. I mean, some of the reasons that happens is because of caps put on by the UK government. It just seems absolutely bizarre to me, but that's not my expertise. I should probably keep my mouth shut on that. I was a university governor for 8 years, though, and I
can hear your engagement there. To the broader point, we've all seen the tax cuts that have been floated by the Chancellor and the Prime Minister ahead of the of the election, between those tax cuts and the way taxes have gone up, thresholds and so on, are people going to be left? We haven't heard the budget, of course, but are people going to be left feeling better off?
I don't know. I mean, you have to go a very long way to overcome the effects of the fiscal drag of the freezing of the tax thresholds. I mean, the national insurance 1% cut that we had, while it was a gain generally for people earning about 25,000 to 50,000, if you look only at this year in isolation and you contrast the freezing of the tax thresholds to the national insurance cut, it was still a loss for those on lower incomes up to about £25,000. And if you look at the entirety of freezing the tax thresholds over the period proposed up to 2027-28, although of course at that point there will be a new government or a new administration, one of the two things, then at which point nothing is going to come close to running over that. So I think that the talk, they want tax cuts, but I'm not sure that they will get close to covering the fiscal drag that we have had. And the other policy that's being mooted at the moment, which sort of made me laugh or chuckle in slight frustration, is these 1% mortgages that they want to bring in. Well, one of the things you mentioned I've written to the Chancellor about is the lifetime ISA. I mean, fix the broken stuff that we've already got before you start trying to bring in new stuff. The lifetime ISA, which is set up for 18 to 39-year-olds, that's how old you have to be when you open it, to help save a deposit for a first house. And what effectively happens is you can put up to £4,000 a year and the state adds 25% on top. So that's an extra grand. Well, the problem with that is it was launched in 2017. House prices have gone up 30%, but the limit on the property you can buy hasn't moved. It's still 450 grand. And now 26 of 32 London boroughs, as an example, average first-time buyer price is above 450 grand. Let me give you a prosaic example of what that means. You've saved for 5 years, you've maxed it out. You've put £20,000 in there. The state's added £25,000. The house you wanted to buy has just trickled up to 460,000. You can't get one in your area. So you now can't use the LISA for a qualifying purpose. You need to get your deposit money out. Now, it's not a case of you put 20 grand in, you've got 25,000, you lose, you don't get the bonus, you get back what you put in. You actually have a 25% penalty, which the maths works out. If you've put 20 grand in, you get a £5,000 bonus on top, take 25% off that. You take out 18,750 quid. You pay the state a penalty of over £1,000 to withdraw your money for buying a first-time property that this scheme was set up to encourage you to do in the first place. The penalty was put in place to stop people manipulating for the scheme and saving for the wrong reasons, yet it is now penalising many young people who've done exactly what the state encouraged them to do, saving for a first-time property, using the money to buy a first-time property. And so my solution on that's pretty simple. Well, of course, you should put the property threshold up, but if you're not going to, you just have a blanket rule that says if you're buying your first-time property, even if it's above the threshold, the penalty will be 20%, which effectively means you get back at least the money that you put in. Now we have 1% mortgages coming, which is yet more interference in the housing market, which tends in the long run to be inflationary and possibly self-defeating. And are we really going to encourage young people to get 1% mortgages? I haven't read the detail. We don't know the detail. They may do it better than I currently think they will. Put in a 1% mortgage, which gives you a huge risk of negative equity, and almost certainly the mortgage lenders, unless the government subsidizes very heavily, will charge them much higher interest rates for doing so than if they had a bigger deposit. We seem to potentially, depending on how this is structured, risk moving back to the bad old days of simply, for electoral gain, pumping the housing market in a self-defeating way that enables and seems to encourage people to put everything and risk all their finances just to get on the property ladder. And actually, there has to be a more sensible way than doing it than saying, hey, here's a 1% deposit when we've got declining house prices, which, if it had been over the last year, would have led many people into negative equity. So I need to see the detail on that. I hope they've thought through all my issues and I'm being stupid because they've come up with loads of solutions. But yeah, first of all, I'd fix the LISA before you start launching new schemes. That's what my frustrated voice is trying to tell you.
We hear it. We hear it. It's a compelling case. Martin, thank you so much for coming on.